A Myanmar junta court has jailed ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi to 7 years in prison for corruption, further ending the 18-month trial of the Nobel laureate. Suu Kyi has been jailed on 5 counts of corruption related to hiring and maintaining of a helicopter that caused loss to the state. Suu Kyi, who is 77 years old, has been convicted on every charge leveled against her, ranging from corruption to illegally possessing walkie-talkies and flouting COVID-19 restrictions. The Nobel Peace Prize winner has also been ordered to serve a total of 26 years in prison after being found guilty of a wide range of offences, all of which she has denied. Suu Kyi has been a prisoner since the generals toppled her government back in February last year. Last week, the United Nations Security Council resolution urged Myanmar's junta to immediately release all arbitrarily detained prisoners, including Aung San Suu Kyi. For more on this, we're now being joined by Dave Grunbaum from Kuala Lumpur, who's a journalist and has covered Myanmar for several years. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Now, given that Suu Kyi is 77, this sentence plus the 26 years in prison, would you consider this essentially a life sentence? Is she likely to spend the rest of her life behind the bars?
If she were to, serve out all this time, given that she's 77, yes, it's a life sentence. But then the question comes up, would she really spend all that time behind bars? And this is where it gets interesting here because, the army, they are facing a resistance that they never thought they'd be up against. They didn't think that the armed resistance against them would be so tough, that the guerrilla war tactics, that the People's Defense Forces in Myanmar, these are people who just a few years ago, many of them were farmers or university students. These are young people in their 20s and 30s who went and got training in guerrilla warfare after the coup, which took place February 1st of 2021. They never thought they'd be up against this kind of a fight. The army never thought that. So the army is just going to look for anything that could try to tamp that down some. So it's very possible, and I stress possible, that they might try to offer Suu Kyi some sort of deal, like perhaps house arrest, home confinement, perhaps freedom, with at least staying within the confines of the country, some sort of freedom in exchange for her trying to get the resistance to not be violent. Aung San Suu Kyi, she always espoused during her earlier stages of home confinement when she was, after she'd had prior sham trials and convicted decades ago, she always promoted non-violence. So would she, in this case, be willing to take a deal so that she wouldn't spend the rest of her life in prison to speak out against violent acts against the junta? We don't know if the army will offer it, and if they offer, would she take it, is another big question. But that's certainly a possibility here.
Right. So you reckon there's a caveat here?
There certainly would be some sort of caveat. The army is going to look for what they think could work in their favor. But would she ever take such a deal? I don't know. And also put yourself, it would be easy to say she would never take such a deal. That may be true. But then again, looking at the rest of your life in prison, if you don't, it's hard to say what she would do. We also don't know. How much does she know about what's going on the outside? She's had very limited contact. She's only been able to meet with her lawyers when she's actually had the dates of the trial. We don't know if she knows exactly about the strong armed resistance against the military. We don't know if she really understands what's going on and if she supports these violent acts that are going on to take on the army. She certainly is in favor of resistance to the coup, but does she support armed resistance? We don't know where she stands on that.
Right, absolutely. You raise a very important point there. Now, also coming back to a point that you'd made earlier, February 1st will mark 2-year anniversary of the military coup. What are we likely to see in the coming year?
So a very strong possibility of the violence getting much, much worse. Myanmar is now essentially in a civil war. And the armed resistance, including the National Unity Government, which is basically the shadow government, these are the people who were from the former civilian government that managed to get away and were not arrested. They really see the next 12 months as crucial and that they've got to put up a strong fight against the army. So you're going to likely see the attacks coming from both sides get a lot stronger and a lot bloodier. And the situation in the country right now is grim. I mean, there are villages where you see beheadings going on. Frontier Myanmar, a publication, a very good news outlet, has done some great reporting on this issue where you see both sides beheading people. Keep in mind, in addition to the armed resistance taking on the army, there are also militias aligned with the army that are using really bad tactics. And both sides are doing these sorts of things. Things are likely to get a lot uglier inside this country. On top of that, we've got roughly 1 million people who've been displaced since the coup. We've got tens of million people who are food insecure, just struggling to get enough food on the table every day. I mean, barely having enough to eat, if they have enough to eat. That could get much, much worse. So the situation in Myanmar could get considerably, considerably worse in the next 12 months.
Right, absolutely. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with all your insights on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.